Which experiment suffered the most inside the Poppy Playtime factory? Was it Lily, Dog Day, or even Poppy herself? So stay tuned, friends, and get comfortable, because in this video, we're going to find out. Let's start with Miss Delight. Her story is the classic case of a normal person turning into a monster without really being at fault. And believe me, it includes a lot of undeserved suffering. After the hour of joy, she and other teacher experiments were locked up in the school without food to satisfy their growing hunger. As time went by, her sisters decided that they would eat her first if they wanted to survive. As Miss Delight fell into madness, she created her own weapon, called Barb. The extreme hunger kept her in constant pain. She could barely get up from the floor. Her own mind ended up saving her, making her believe that Barb was talking to her and telling her to kill and eat the other teachers. She didn't want to do it, but she felt she had no other choice. So she ended up cannibalizing them, although she eventually felt better afterwards. Because guilt was consuming her, she wrote her thoughts on papers all over the school. Years later, after joining up with Catnap, we arrived at the factory and finally finished off Miss Delight by crushing her with a heavy door. And like Lily, she probably didn't feel anything at that moment. But the previous years were absolutely horrible for her. Lily Lovebraids, one of the most disturbing cases in Chapter 5. During the hour of joy, the employee Gracie Green was captured by 3 experiments. We know that they remembered perfectly how she tortured them with her conditioning. The prototype ended up turning her into an experiment. And if Riley's journals made anything clear to us in Chapter 4, it's that this process wasn't just a simple transformation. It was torture, designed to destroy the body and mind of its victims. But for Lily, that was only the beginning. Because unlike the surgeries performed on the orphans, Gracie Green wasn't given any anesthesia. She went through all of it fully awake and in excruciating pain. After all that, she was locked up, isolated, and forced to watch the same conditioning videos she created when she was still human over and over again. She was barely given enough to survive, a little food and a little water. Just enough to keep her alive. The punishment wasn't just physical. It was everything. Over time, her mind began to break. Despair consumed her completely. And in the end, everything ended in the coldest way possible. Gracie's mind. Gracie disappeared and Lily Lovebraids was born, but her end was quite tragic and cold. Her body fell from a very high place and was crushed by a platform. And even though her death may have been brief, even a relief compared to the others, it doesn't change what she went through before. Because the truly terrifying thing about Lily Lovebraids is not how she died, but how long it took. She stayed alive being punished and forced to face the worst version of herself over and over again. Dog Day. When he and the other smiling critters tried to rebel against the prototype, they lost. And Dog Day had to watch all his friends die in front of him. But that wasn't the worst part. As punishment, his former friend Catnap brutally tore off his legs and hung him in a small damp cell, leaving him there for many years. No food, no interaction, and no reason to live. And then we arrived. This caused a horde of wild toys to attack him, resulting in an absolutely horrible death. He wasn't crushed or burned, he was devoured from the inside. His flesh and organs were torn apart by thousands of tiny teeth. He lost control of his body while the toys used him to chase us through the tunnels, while he listened to himself choking and suffocating. This is one of the most horrible deaths in all of history. But we also have to talk about Poppy. Surprisingly, her creation was not horrible at the beginning. She was created by her own father, Elliot Ludwig, so he could have his daughter back. But all of this changes later. As part of the body initiative, she was subjected to horrible procedures, with her organs being removed for each investigation. Each time she felt less like herself and gradually lost hope. After the hour of joy, her suffering continued when the prototype locked her in its box. She screamed, cried, tried to escape, but she couldn't. She remained trapped until Player found her. But that only opened the door to more pain. She was kidnapped by Mommy Longlegs. Kissy Missy was attacked. She was imprisoned by Lily. And finally, she had to face the prototype. Who captured her? Despite her actions, Poppy has good intentions, but she really has suffered for more than a decade. But what we see in the game through these stories only shows us the surface of how dark everything really becomes. Another character we have to talk about is Yarnaby. His death is completely the opposite of Lily's. This one was not immediate. He was trapped on a metal hook through his own mouth, wrapped in flames and with no chance to escape. He was in such unbearable and terrifying pain at the same time that his only relief came when he fell into a pit of molten lava. Even before that, Yarnaby suffered much more. When he was a child, Queen Davidson was mentally manipulated by Dr. Harley Sawyer to push himself harder in his tests at the game station. Sawyer pretended to care about the naive boy, but in reality, he only wanted to make sure that Queen would be another successful experiment in the future. And something even more tragic. After the experiment, Harley Sawyer completely isolated Yarnaby, making himself practically his entire world, eliminating any other part of his personality that he might have had. This led Yarnaby to fall into a deep depression after Harley Sawyer himself was experimented on and removed. Poor Yarnaby barely ate, moved, or showed any signs of life, all because of the absence of the man he believed cared about him, even though the opposite was true. But if you thought that was the worst, Yarnaby also appears in the game covered in wounds, scratches, and something worse, which implies that Sawyer physically abused him. That makes it one of the most horrible aspects of his story. There's no way to hide how tragic all of this is, and we have to remember that all of this happened to an innocent child. Unlike Lily, whose situation was driven by revenge, Yarnaby was completely innocent. And even so, he was forced to suffer from the day he was created. And even though it seems impossible, his story is even worse. He was created from 3 children with different personalities, without full control of his mind. One of them, Jack, died tragically and was used in the experiment. Then, Playtime invited his parents, knowing they would be killed by another aggressive experiment, and that's what happened. Afterwards, Jack regained control and cried over his parents' bodies. Even so, he moved on, helping other toys and becoming the leader. But after the destruction of Safe Heaven and the loss of everything, he completely broke down, becoming a monster. We had to stop him using saws, freezing temperatures, and machinery. In his final moments, he apologized. He died in utter agony. In the end, everyone suffered, but not in the same way. Lily broke down mentally, Miss Delight lost everything, and Dog Day was pushed to the limit, both physically and by the pain he endured. Now tell me, who do you think was the experiment that suffered the most? We'll be reading your comments.